Okay, back with another video on NIO. Yeah, the title of this video is Will NIO go bankrupt because of the coronavirus? The market has just opened and NIO is already down what seems to be around 13% right now, so almost below $4 a share. Well, just after I posted my last video where I was very skeptical about the future of NIO and the funding secured situation, also how everything plays out with the GAC deal. Well, I told everyone how I sold around 90% of my NIO shares and just stayed back in with a little bit invested in order to see how the situation plays out. But actually, NIO had quite a good week afterwards. The shares reached more than $5.60. And I was prepared to kind of losing out of, a little bit of a run. But I just said to myself that I just want to go back into NIO once the funding situation is all cleared. And well, I think that just a couple of last days just shows how quickly everything can change regarding NIO. So I'm trading NIO quite a bit now. I'm invested since 1 year more or less, so I know how volatile this stock is. I know how it can go up and down very fast. So I'm not surprised to see that we're basically losing all of the gains of during the last weeks already, going back to 4. That's around the area where I sold off all of my stocks. So all of the recent gains, they're just erased and flushed. What happened is now basically all of the positive sentiment around NIO was kind of destroyed by the coronavirus breaking out in China, which definitely has some effects on the markets in general, but particularly on a volatile stock just as NIO. So I just want to go through some of the comments that you guys left behind on my last video. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the discussion. I see lots of people who are currently invested in NIO and asking me how I see particular aspects of the business model of NIO, but also how I personally manage my risk and so on. And I want to get back to some of those questions in the comments and later on talk a bit more specific on the current funding situation in NIO. And how this all may play out in the context of the coronavirus breaking out. One of the comments was asking about the news stake or the filing announcing that Baillie and Gifford Co, the private investor who's also invested in Tesla actually, has upped their shares in NIO. What are my views on it? Well, for sure it's good and positive that one of the large institutional investors is increasing their shares in NIO, which is great, but you also need to consider that in this case, Baillie and Gifford, they may have sold some of the profits which they made in Tesla and could have also used those kind of profits in order to increase their shares in NIO in order to bring down their initial costs, because as far as I know, they have a much higher cost basis so far. So this could be kind of a way of managing their current cost in NIO stake. The date of the filing is the 31st of December. So that was before the very huge spike in NIO that happened during NIO Day and in the coming days afterwards. So it could well be that they actually used this kind of spike to sell off their shares once again. I think that's actually unlikely in a way because, I see them as a long-term holder and investor. However, it's definitely possible. So I wouldn't see this kind of news as an argument for the case that they know something that we don't do and they know that the funding is secured. Instead, I think they just kind of used it in order to bring down their cost, and that way they might be able to reduce losses in some cases. Then the next questions have all been around the battery swapping technology. So it seems you guys are really interested into that. So one question was, or a comment was, they should add chargers at the battery swap stations as well. So if there's, say, a 30-minute wait to get the swap, just charge up instead. In terms of battery swap, can you comment on folks who worry about getting battery that has less total charge due to usage versus the one that was swapped out of your vehicle, which could have been newer battery? So I think in both cases there's nothing to worry about. So the first thing is that NIO already has chargers exactly next to the swapping stations. So they exactly thought through this case that once the battery swapping station is currently in use, you can just park the NIO car next to it and you can charge meanwhile. Another point regarding the battery that you get in replacement, I don't think that's really an issue because currently the batteries can be swapped for free. So in case that you, let's say, get a battery that hasn't a good capacity or something, or might have a technical issue or something like that, you can just go and swap the battery for free again, so there's no issue at all. I would rather see it on the positive side that you already saw that with the battery issues that NIO had. Once there is an issue, you can just swap it quickly and you get a new replacement with a new battery that is totally fine. So it's actually a very positive thing here. So lots of you who have commented seem to be a little bit worried about the swapping technology, and as opposed to what Tesla is doing. And also Tesla has been thinking about this kind of technology before, but then decided to not use it. And also there have been startups like Better Place who have used this technology before, but then were not successful. However, in the current situation, I think this kind of battery swapping technology is actually one of the positives that NIO currently has as an asset, because they have already started building this kind of infrastructure. So it kind of is a competitive advantage to some of the other competitors who don't have such kind of a technology. Plus, the Chinese government, this was one of the news which let the NIO shares run again, wants to kind of standardize this kind of technology. So in this case, if the Chinese government wants to do something like this, we know there's lots of efforts and lots of money, of course, behind that. And in this case, NIO might be actually in a very good situation. Plus, during the last earning call, Li Bin, he also had some quite interesting comments around battery swapping technology. And sometimes it sounded a little bit like this could be a business model or a revenue stream for NIO itself, with the first signs that some of the competitors like Xiaopeng starting to use the technology as well. But this actually brings me back to the initial question, what's the current status of the funding? What progress has been made? What is my opinion about how's the funding going to happen, and so on? And most importantly, what's the recent development regarding the coronavirus? How could it affect NIO? And now we're around 1 hour into the market, and NIO is a little bit recovering, so it's 10% down instead of 13%. Still, obviously, a huge loss for today, and it's looking quite serious for NIO. And I was kind of expecting such kind of setbacks because I was trading NIO since quite a couple of months, almost a year, and I saw these kind of reactions to news of NIO several times. So I know that the stock can go up very, very fast, but it can also drop and wipe out any profits very, very quickly. And in my personal opinion, the outbreak of the coronavirus is actually kind of a black swan event. So one of those events which you cannot anticipate, and certainly the NIO management has not anticipated as well. And it could be a major tragedy or serious event happening now for NIO, because it has impact on several sides of what NIO currently needs to do. So for one, I've outlined like the NIO management strategy currently is to just sell as many cars as possible in order to get lots of cash flow in order to fund the business, thereby reducing the losses, which is a very, very risky strategy by itself, I think. I was already skeptical of this kind of strategy because, for one, we have now the weakest quarter in the year coming up, Q1. It's always weak for all of the automakers, so they sell less cars than they do, let's say, during summer and by the end of the year. Plus, there's also the Chinese New Year coming up. So basically the entire country shuts down, everybody travels back home. So there's not lots of sales to be expected. And NIO did something which is already showing that they want to keep the stores open. So they said like the NIO houses, they stay open during the Chinese New Year so people can still buy the cars, which is quite extraordinary in Chinese terms. But yeah, it's because of the strategy that they are currently running that they want to fund the business out of the cash flow. So now with the virus breakout, the situation is very serious for NIO because now they don't even have Chinese New Year, which is limiting sales, but also the companies are shutting down. So I read that Shanghai is urging the businesses to only open up by the 9th of February. So also we can expect that this will impact sales. Even though I think in China it's always possible that, with a team effort, they might be able to still scale and increase the sales. So, but this strategy is very risky, and I wouldn't bet my money on this case that the strategy like that will work in order, to sell as many cars as possible. Another thing which got me very skeptical about the strategy is that the average sales price of the cars went down. So even though they might manage to sell more cars, which now is getting more and more difficult with the virus breakout and Chinese New Year, they still get less money with each of the sale. So another very serious consequence of the virus breakout and the slump in the NIO share price today is that now the share price is getting less and less attractive from an investor perspective. So there's new fear, the sentiment is more negative, and also the share price is simply not as high anymore, which would maybe prevent NIO from making a second offering at a higher share price, and thereby diluting investors even more. So in my personal view, it doesn't make sense to stay invested in NIO with a big chunk of my money, because if a new investor comes in at obviously favorable terms for the investor, because they have all of the leverage and the bargaining power, we as investors, we might get diluted and also be left out with a less positive deal. And if we jump into the details of what are currently actually the options for NIO to raise new funds or to stay in business, I think one option is definitely the deal with GAC, which makes sense in my point of view, because they have been involved in joint ventures. They are partners. It's a local Chinese company. It makes sense for GAC to have like a young, successful brand in the EV space, and also for NIO, there are quite a couple of good partnering options with this kind of deal. However, the problem is that I'm not seeing GAC going in and funding the entire deal by themselves. There's no way that they will throw $1 billion at NIO. Also, we need to look at the very details here, which are that there's NIO as a company listed at a NASDAQ, which is essentially a Cayman Island listed holding in which we as overseas investors are invested in and which raises US dollars. And then there is also NIO in China, which cannot raise money from outside investors. So there's no way for NIO China to raise US dollars. So this is part of how China works with protecting their own currency, and also how Chinese companies list in the US, which can actually be a very important risk factor for any of your investments in Chinese companies. And in this case for NIO, it's quite an issue, because while they might find it easier currently to raise actually renminbi, like Chinese yuan, but might find it difficult to raise US dollars. However, the company that we are all invested in, the NASDAQ listed US entity, or actually Cayman Island entity, they need US dollars in order to fund their operations. So one quite likely event would be that NIO makes a second offering for the US shareholders, thereby diluting the shareholders and raising a new round, or getting more capital. Another way would be that one of the institutional investors or the companies that are invested in NIO, for instance Baidu, Tencent, or NetEase, they might increase their stake and buy new shares or buy bits of the company, and that is also quite likely to happen, but we don't know the terms. Obviously, since NIO is a very cash strapped right now, they might be those other companies might be in a very good position in order to have favorable terms. And that was also one of your questions regarding that there are rumors that those investors that NIO is talking with have some certain terms, for instance, leaving the company, which I think Well, yeah, it's highly likely that there are some very strict terms that NIO currently doesn't want to take. Also, Li Bin, he's obviously a invested founder, so he want to keep as much a stake in a company as possible, and it's also kind of his baby for sure. So he doesn't want to give away the company, nor he doesn't want to leave. So it makes a lot of sense that that some of those investment talks currently are not successful because simply NIO and Li Bin, they're looking for arguments and ways to get some positive terms. On the other hand, there are the investors who know that NIO is kind of running out of cash, and they can definitely, secure a better position of their new stakes in NIO. Another comment I often get is about, will the government actually just help NIO out? NIO is too big to fail or too important. There's too much of a face loss if NIO wasn't rescued by the government. Where I think, well, I'm not so sure about that. So for one, yes, NIO is very important, and I think there would be kind of a face loss, and actually that the Chinese government or local governments have no interest in letting NIO fail. On the other hand, we have seen that NIO is engaging in such talks, for instance, with the Beijing E-Town, where they were supposed to struck a deal with around 1 billion of funding. However, it never was successful, and I think one part of it is maybe that because NIO is not locally somewhere with their own factory, they're not about to have those owned assets somewhere locally. Instead, they are using this network of distributors and partners to produce the cars. That might be kind of a drawback in terms of a local government funding, because of course the local government, they want to have local investment, for instance, a factory, and also want to make sure that the jobs that are created stay within a controllable area, and also with NIO within the company, whereas NIO is kind of this very lean business model currently, which actually I like, but they're just subcontracting a lot of stuff, so that kind of takes a little bit of their leverage and arguments for closing a deal with local governments here. And last but not least, another option would be that NIO gets bought by one of the competitors. For instance, one of the big German brands, Volkswagen, they could easily afford NIO. Currently, if it's valued around $4 billion US dollars, that's nothing to a company like Volkswagen. And we see by the current statements by Herbert Diess how important electric mobility is to him, also how he wants to compete, for instance, with Tesla. And on the other hand, I see that NIO is extremely valuable by what they have produced in terms of their IP, their technology, the brand. So I'm not worried at all that NIO may fail in this regard. That's actually what makes me very positive, that NIO will be at some point somehow able to raise money or continue to exist. However, it's just not clear how and with whom and what the outcomes will be. So all of these options in the context of a cash-strapped NIO. So by the end of Q3, they only had 270 million US dollars left in the bank account. And that was already including the bond by Tencent and the parts of the bond from the founder and CEO Li Bin. Made it too risky for me to stay in this investment with a very large chunk of my personal investment. And the situation is really, really risky right now. I would certainly not recommend investing in NIO if you can't afford to lose all of the money that you have invested in NIO. Because by the end of Q3, as I just mentioned, they only had 270 million US dollars left, but they have been burning more than 200 million US dollars during that quarter between Q2 and Q3. So now the Q4 quarter is still unreported. So of course they may still be able to reduce the cost and also have more revenues, because we know that NIO has reported very positive sales. However, we also need to consider that now NIO is already in Q1, and as I've outlined before, now we have the problems of the seasonal downturn, of the Chinese New Year and now also the virus breaking out, I don't see how NIO wants to go through this area without securing the funding. And summary, once again, for me, I would like to wait until funding is secured, and I see some news with the deals on the table, with where we see the conditions, who is going into NIO, who's giving them money, on what kind of terms, and then I'm happy to go back into NIO, because I think in the long run, as outlined in my other videos, NIO has such a strong IP and technology, and it's a very interesting brand in the right market that I think in the future this could be a very, very valuable stock. So what I think we could see in the meantime is that it seems like NIO is not able to close a very big round for now. So the 1 billion funding, I think, is off the table for now. But what might happen is that NIO is able to give out some smaller convertible bonds through US bondholders, and thereby funding their operations kind of on a quarter-to-quarter basis, and thereby keep on proving that the business model is working, and kind of collecting the arguments in order to raise a bigger round. Whereas this approach may work in the short term and might be a valid option for the management. For me as an investor, it's just too short term. It's not a long-term view where I can say, okay, in the next 10 years, we possibly achieve like 10x in increase in revenues and so on, because at the current time, the planning can only be like the next quarter and so on. So I would highly suggest that you also think around what is your personal investment currently, what is your strategy, how much could you afford to lose, and how much do you trust in NIO to making the next step and securing the funding. So currently the virus breakout may have some serious impact, as I outlined, on the funding, but also on the strategy of funding NIO through sales, and thereby I am kind of just keep sitting on the sidelines until the funding is secured. What are your views on it? Let me know how you wanna manage your personal risk. Do you keep investing in NIO? What are your views on the funding options, and how do you see this outbreak and the latest slump in the share price? Let me know in the comments below, and I'm happy to make another video based on the comments next time. Until then, see you next time. Thank you for watching. Appreciate any likes or subscriptions to our account. And yeah, we will have more videos coming in this area about NIO, electric mobility in China, but also other topics around what makes China innovative, and also what kind of interesting companies we see currently in China, and what they do differently and unique. So yeah, let's keep in touch. See ya.